Well, as in 2014 referendum, we are saying that the day after independence, the Scottish Government will take over responsibility for paying the state pension. And they're able to do that because it's a pay-as-you-go scheme. So the state pension is funded on a monthly basis by the contributions of people in work. And that money goes almost straight back out to the pensioners in the form of their monthly pension payment. So in Scotland, we spend about £8.5 billion a year on the state pension. We actually raise through national insurance contributions about £2 billion a year more than that. So all that money will be collected by the Scottish Treasury and will be dished out by the Scottish Pensions Department to Scottish pensioners, and that's how it's going to work. Well, if you look at the state pension in the UK, it's the lowest in the whole of Europe, both inside the EU and outside the EU. Pensioners in Norway, for example, have a pension that's almost equal to the average national wage. And even in Portugal, regarded as a very poor country in relative terms within the EU, the pension is equivalent to about 50% of the average national wage. So what we want to do over a period of time is make the Scottish pensioner as well off as the average European pensioner. And that would mean taking the pension from being the lowest in Europe to being one of the better pensions in Europe. And eventually, I would hope, in the top 4 or 5 highest pensions in Europe. You can't do that overnight, but over a period of years, we can do that. And of course, if the Scottish economy grows, it will be much easier to do that much quicker. And key to all of this is an economic growth policy, sustainable economic growth that will see wages increase, the standard of living increase, and the standard of living increase shared with the pensioner community. Well, the UK would not pay the Scottish pension as such, because I think that would be daft. If we're collecting the national insurance contributions and someone else is paying the pensions, obviously nobody's going to sign up to that. But what is the case is that all of those people who have paid in contributions to the UK National Insurance Fund, the UK National Insurance Fund is liable in law to pay the pension that those people's contributions are entitled them to. So the easy way to do this in the transition to independence is for the Scottish Government to take responsibility from day one of independence of raising the national insurance contributions from the workers to pay the pensioners and guaranteeing every pensioner in Scotland the pension they're already getting, and through time a better pension. And in the negotiations on independence, in the settlement between an independent Scotland and the rest of the UK, when we come to the national debt issue, we take into consideration the liabilities that Scottish pensioners are owed, or the Scottish pension system is owed by the National Insurance Fund in London. Now let me give you an example of that. We spend just over £8 billion a year in state pensions in Scotland. And the people who are getting those state pensions are getting them because they've made 30, 40 years contributions through the National Insurance Fund. So they have paid for their pension, although it's a pay-as-you-go scheme. But the liability lies with the pension fund. So we would take the liability outstanding at the time of independence. So it's £8 billion a year for existing pensioners. So that liability would then be deducted from our share of the national debt that we had to take on responsibility for. So in practical terms, at the moment, existing pensioners, we pay out just over £8 billion a year. Supposing on average, the existing pensioners still claimed a pension on average for another 10 years. So over that 10 years, there's an £80 billion liability on the National Insurance Fund in London. So that money would be deducted from anything that we have to pay back to London as part of the deal on the national debt when we become independent. Pensioners don't need to worry about all that stuff. All the pensioners really need to know is that they're guaranteed their pension on day one of independence and every other day thereafter, and they'll get at least the same pension at the same time as they're getting it now, and also they'll have a far better realistic prospect over time of getting a better state pension like all the other pensioners in Europe get.